Good morning and welcome to the San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefing for community and faith partners. In today's program, we discuss how congregations can support newly arrived asylum seekers in San Francisco. A special thanks, the San Francisco Interfaith Council online briefings are supported by a grant from MetaFund. Thank you. The important and ongoing work of the San Francisco Interfaith Council would not be possible without generous funding from congregations, corporations, faith-based social service agencies, foundations, judicatories, and supporters like you. Help us spread the word. Visit sfinterfaithcouncil.org to learn about SFIC programming and how to become a supporter. Follow SFIC on Facebook and Twitter. And subscribe to SFIC's YouTube channel to watch all of our previous virtual events. A bit of housekeeping. Today's program is being recorded. For audio and video, all participants are muted and without video to minimize distraction. To submit a question or comment, select the chat button at the bottom of your screen and send a message to Q&A. Questions will be forwarded to the presenter and answered time permitting. To activate closed captions, select the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and click Enable Live Transcription. There's no time like the present for San Franciscans to prepare for changes in the virus. And so the San Francisco Department of Public Health urges people to be ready for COVID by staying up to date on their vaccinations, knowing how to reach their doctor, keeping a supply of COVID rapid tests, keeping masks handy, planning ahead for possible infection, and staying informed with trusted sources of information, such as sf.gov/COVID. Now is the time to come together, San Francisco. Together we can stop Asian discrimination, bias, hate, and violence. The COVID-19 virus has no race or nationality. It is simply a disease. To report a hate crime, call the SFPD at 415-553-1133. And at this time, I'd like to hand the floor over to the Executive Director of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, Michael Pappas. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trey. Good morning. I'm Michael Pappas, pronouns he, him, and his. And on behalf of the San Francisco Interfaith Council, I want to welcome you to this week's online briefing for community and faith partners. With the increasing movement of red state governors and their legislatures to export undocumented immigrants to blue state metropolitan cities such as our own, time is of the essence with regard to ways communities of faith can figure into the response equation. This week's online briefing for community and faith partners, hosted by the San Francisco Interfaith Council, features a presentation by Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity's Nueva Esperanza Accompaniment Team Program Manager, Kelly Younger, who will offer an overview of her organization's important immigration work, the danger of exploiting unknowing immigrants for political gain, and practical ways in which San Francisco congregations can support newly arrived asylum seekers. And as we do at the beginning of each of these programs, allow me at this time to offer the interfaith statement of the San Francisco Interfaith Council. This is an interfaith community. Whatever our individual belief, it can be freely expressed here with no apologies. If we are invited to offer a prayer in this setting, it should be offered according to the tradition with which we identify. If we are invited to speak on a subject from the perspective of our tradition, we are free to do so without fear of offending those who come from another tradition. We come together as people of faith to learn from each other that we might better understand the multiplicity of faith traditions in our city and in our world. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Rabbi Michael Copeland, the senior rabbi at Congregation Sha'ar Sahav. I've known Rabbi Copeland many, many years, and the great interfaith experiment and the mission is shared space between this wonderful congregation and a Mennonite congregation. And Rabbi Copeland is with us today primarily because she is working very closely with the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, and especially on this issue. Rabbi Copeland, we welcome you and we invite you to ground us in this reflective moment.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. I'm Rabbi Michael Copeland. I use she, her pronouns. So in the Jewish tradition, we are approaching in the coming month the Passover holiday, when we celebrate our liberation from slavery, but also the event that led to our wandering in the desert for 40 years as refugees. To mark the entry into this season, we recently held a refugee Shabbat, when we had the honor of introducing to our synagogue community the family from Colombia that were accompanying. We shared songs, Colombian food, prayer, and poetry. I'd like to share one of those poems written by Venezuelan Rabbi Monica Gomery. It's hard to say what an immigrant is. There's a place in you, fertile as soil, but changeling as weather. There's a place in you. It raised you and gave you the letters of too many languages. It gave you your tenderness, your distance, your rage. What a child of an immigrant is, thrice born, 3 sets of eyes, belonging to no one, carrying documents written with invisible ink, speaking languages scavenged from cousins and radio hosts, or else speaking the silence, that primary language of people who have been exactly everywhere and nowhere, excavated and learned by the gaps in between. Please find in a moment the words in the chat for the sanctuary song. Many of our houses of worship are sanctuaries, but not just sanctuaries as in the places that we pray. Many of us are part of the sanctuary movement, supporting refugees and other immigrants, and sometimes our sacred buildings provide actual safe shelter. In the Torah, God tells us in Hebrew, Va'asuli mikdash, not just to build a sanctuary, but to make a sanctuary so that God may live within and amidst our people. May we all become a sanctuary so God's presence can be an everyday presence in our lives and in our work. So I'll share with you the sanctuary song. Yeah, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Ya prepárame, ser un santuario, bendito y sagrado, lleno de gracia. Seré un santuario siempre para ti. Va'asuli mikdash שכנתי בתוכם, ואנחנו נברך ים מעתה ועד העולם.
Thank you, Rabbi Copeland, and for grounding us in this reflective moment and reminding us too that we are a sanctuary city. Before there was a sanctuary ordinance, there was a sanctuary movement, and that movement was led by communities of faith and religious institutions. In fact, when the former president was elected and was threatening to withhold funds to San Francisco faith-based social service agencies and other social service agencies for the important work they're doing because we are a sanctuary city. The San Francisco Interfaith Council's name appears on 2 amicus briefs suing both the Attorney General and the President, and those cases were successful. We stand in solidarity with our immigrants and undocumented sisters and brothers and are very grateful to the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, with whom we have collaborated and offer support. We are very blessed to have with us today Kelly Younger, the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity's Nueva Esperanza Accompaniment Team Program Manager. Kelly, thank you so much for being with us. I think we were all a little shocked when asylum seekers were exported to Martha's Vineyard, of all places. And we were grateful that the religious community there was prepared and ready to respond. And as a result of that, we've all been meeting, and I see my friend Richard Whipple from the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs with us. We've been meeting with our city partners at the Human Services Agency, OSEA, and the Department of Emergency Management, as well as a number of nonprofits, so that we can have a coordinated way to welcome asylees coming to San Francisco, should that happen. Kelly, your work and the work of your organization has been critical in terms of leading the faith perspective on this. And so without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's really nice to see some familiar, I can't see your faces, but your names. So thank you for everyone who's here. And thank you, Rabbi Michael. That was really beautiful. And for reminding all of us of the Immigration Shabbat that you all hosted and how beautiful that was with the Colombian family you're accompanying. So I am here, as Michael said, to present to you all what we can do in San Francisco to support asylum seekers. I'm just going to pull up my presentation, and then we can get started. Here we are. So as Michael said, I am Kelly Younger. I am the manager of our NEAT program, which stands for Nueva Esperanza Accompaniment Teams. And this is with the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. So we're going to go into more depth of what that program is. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Interfaith Movement, we are a multi-faith organization, and we work for the dignity and full inclusion of immigrants and people impacted by incarceration. Often these two things overlap because, as many of you may know, immigrants are often put in detention centers. So we really work at the intersection of those spaces. And as people of faith, what we're hoping to do is seek justice that upholds the sacred dignity and rights of every person. We believe that our shared faith values as an interfaith organization really believe in that value of each person just for being human. So we do this through advocacy work, accompaniment work, and leadership development. Today, we're primarily going to be talking about accompaniment work. So we have a program called the Nueva Esperanza Accompaniment Teams Program. And what this program does is it's an effort to create action and radical welcome between your congregation and a recently arrived person or family. So the people that we accompany in this program, they're people that got here got to the United States within the last year, and specifically do not have other friends or family to welcome them here. That's really the gap that we're trying to fill, because often, of course, the immigrant community receives their own and families receive their own. But what happens if you don't have family or friends or anyone known in the United States? That's what we're hoping to do, is create a space where people will be welcomed as though it were their family and friends. So these are some pictures that I like to share of real moments from our accompaniment efforts. So There's a piñata party on the left for a kid's birthday in Redwood City. We've hosted several weddings of couples that have gotten married through, they were already couples when they came, and then they decided to get married when they're here. And it's really beautiful because the congregations host it in their own space. And then just a big dinner. And this is, I shouldn't say her name, but I was about to. This is a friend, let's say, who I personally dyed her hair blue. So it was a fun moment. But these are just some examples of how community is formed, is through these moments and celebrations and really living life together. I want to give this made up example, but it's really representative of people that we accompany. So imagine meeting Raquel and her family. Raquel is a woman who got here 2 months ago from El Salvador with her children. She traveled by foot and left El Salvador, literally walked across the country. And then, if some of you may have heard of what's called La Bestia, which is a train called the Beast, that lots of people have to hop onto the train to get a ride. Like they hop onto the top of the train, or they hide underneath the train while it's moving by the wheels. So it's a really treacherous, really dangerous journey. She did that. And the reason she decided to leave her home is because her home, her country, but also her area where she lives, there are gang members that murdered her husband already, destroyed her business, and kidnapped her son at one point. I wanted to point out it can be very common. Like when I say gang, it's more like an international organization. So it's actually does take over a country, and there really is nowhere safe to go away from the gang. And when she went to get help, the police tried to bribe her because the police are corrupt near her. And therefore, she's seeking asylum. She's seeking safety. And she also wasn't able to get safety from the police where she lives. So what happens when we accompany people? We have a commitment. We get together teams of 5 or 6 volunteers from a congregation, and we have them walk alongside the person for a commitment of 6 months. And in those 6 months, as I showed in the pictures, we're really creating relationship, which has its own extremely important value. And we're also hoping to direct people to resources. This way they can become self-sufficient, and hopefully in those 6 months, learn about the resources available to them in the community so they know where to go for what in the future. Together, this can be a really empowering experience. I can't tell you how many times the people we accompany will say things like, I never expected to meet nice people here. So many other people, even in the US, that they've encountered are racist. Like, people can really feel empowered because they're brought into the community as equals after experiencing all these terrible things on their journey here and back at home. And in this way, we're also changing the narrative, because the common narrative out there tends to be negative about immigrants. And the more people from congregations that live here that have a close relationship with someone who is an immigrant, the more that idea of the criminalized immigrant or the bad migrant changes through personal experience. And as Rabbi Michael was saying, all of this is a way to lead to sanctuary. Sanctuary means safety, and people can really feel safe with these teams of volunteers. So when I talk about resources, what I'm talking about, we actually do not provide financially for people, because our entire mission is that people would be able to be self-sufficient. But we do listen to them to hear what their goals are and their priorities. Every week or two, we meet up with them to listen. And then based on what their priorities are, we hopefully can orient them to those in the community. So for example, if we were to meet up with Raquel for our first team meeting, she might share that she needs food, she needs to see a doctor, and she needs a lawyer. And so the team would proceed to link her to a food bank, lead her to a health clinic, and research what legal nonprofits are available in the area. We always share that we are volunteers, so we don't have a guarantee of any of these things, but we do our best. And it's normal for the volunteers not to know where these things are or where to go, and everyone to be learning together. All of this leads to hopefully healing, and in that way, justice. So as I was mentioning, it can be very liberating from oppression to just to feel safe. People can also share about themselves and hear messages back that uplift their worth. Hear back from the team, we know you, we see you, and we value you. And people also have opportunities to contribute their gifts. So often families will, for example, do a tamale sale. They'll do a sale of a food from their country as a fundraiser, but also to share a gift they might have. We also keep hope alive by listening to people's priorities, listening to their hopes for their future, and just give them space to be human. Lots of times people are very on high alert when they come here because they've been living in a lot of dangerous situations. And after a few months, once their bodies and minds can feel safe, starts to come out those feelings that they've been experiencing of grief or rage, not towards people, but towards situations that are that they lived through. And that can be a really healing experience as well. This picture is of a woman, Charlotte. She's a trans woman, and she was able to share her story to the congregation that accompanied her. And that's one way that not just the 5 or 6 volunteers, but the entire congregation got to be by her side and accompany her and learn from her through what she chose to share. So let's talk about what's happening right now. So in San Francisco today, since 2015, we have been accompanying people back to back. People are constantly arriving here, more people than we can accompany. And we've had 8 congregations in San Francisco participate in Nueva Esperanza. It's been a really beautiful experience. I noticed a few people attending from St. Mark's, Sherith Israel, Calvary, and St. Mary's, to name a few. And this list of countries is actually there's people we accompany in other parts of the Bay Area from other places, but in San Francisco, we actually have accompanied people from all these places, including right now a Colombian family. And this picture is of, I won't say their names, but person A got here and was accompanied by their team. And then person B got here, they didn't know each other. And person A then accompanied person B and took them to Twin Peaks and showed them the city. And it was a really beautiful experience because again, that person was able to contribute their gifts and offer the same experience they had being accompanied to a new person that had just gotten here. So I'm going to turn it over to Rich. Rich is going to talk a little bit about what's happening that Michael mentioned with the specific planning efforts right now in San Francisco. And go ahead, Rich.
Thanks, Kelly. Good morning, everyone. Rich Whipple, he, him, his, and I work for the city's Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs. And I'm happy to spend just a few moments with you all recapping some of the planning efforts that the city is undergoing, being mindful that there, as Kelly just shared, is an existing kind of surge of folks that are arriving every day and have been for quite some time. While there's also concern about us receiving a large volume of folks through some of the busing scenarios that Michael shared at the top of this meeting. So I just wanted to start by sharing and reemphasizing what Kelly said, that we are aware that there are already many migrants that have arrived here, for many years, but especially in the last year, we've seen an increase. I know I see folks, joining this meeting that are also part of some of the city working groups that I'm in. So I'm grateful to have other folks here as well, and then partners from the school district and others who have shared that we've seen, hundreds of newcomer students in the school district in this last year that have been matriculating. We've seen our nonprofit partners have the kind of largest wait list that they've seen for all types of services: immigration legal services, representation at the immigration court, case management, healthcare services, and the like. So I'm mindful that even though a lot of our city's planning efforts are really centered around a mass arrival event, the current need is already very severe and very dire. So really appreciate this space for folks to be enrolled in these important efforts. So the response efforts, as mentioned, are really being led by 3 city agencies. So the Human Services Agency, the Department of Emergency Management, the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, and then also our Department of Public Health, of course. So that's 4. I can't count, apparently, it's early. So a lot of the work that we're doing right now is really to focus on preparing for a shelter activation for a mass arrival event. So this would look like a short-term shelter if a bus was to arrive from another part of the country, primarily border cities, as we've been hearing a lot about in the media, or potentially a plane as well. In those situations, I think the city is really keen to explore a shelter that could provide a range of services, including intake, case management, connection to immediate immigration legal services. So we know filing an asylum application is a super important way to enable folks to then also pursue a work authorization, but that takes some time. And then of course, healthcare screenings and services, as well as access and support finding housing, which I think is one of the trickier pieces, as we, as San Francisco centered organizations and residents are aware that the city is already grappling with a really severe homelessness kind of epidemic, really. So I think we know that housing is already a big need for the city, but we know it's especially acute for folks who are newcomers who have no connection and often the least eligibility for support services that are offered from the city. So I know that I wanted to just appreciate Michael and the Interfaith Council and you all. I know that the Human Services Agency has already had many conversations with the Interfaith Council and with some of you. But I think a few things that I wanted to just flag in terms of ways that we see the faith community being able to support, in addition to what Kelly is sharing, is really just if I know there's been a lot of vetting that's been going on for potential shelter venues and locations. And again, thank you, Michael, for spearheading that effort. If there are additional ideas that haven't already been vetted, through Michael or ourselves and Human Services Agency, please feel free to reach out to me directly or to Michael as well, so that we can continue that search. And then the other big push, as I think Kelly's about to get to in a moment, is really around this critical need for housing, even short-term, mid-term housing opportunities, and being able to host an individual or family that may arrive unhoused with no connection or no anchor here. I think there are more ways that the city is hoping to build opportunities for volunteerism and contributions. I think those are in the works, and we're happy to follow up at a later time as we kind of are building this car as we drive it, as they say. So those are the pieces that I'll add, but just wanted to appreciate this space and the opportunity to join you all.
Thank you. And Michael, can you tell me until what time I have?
So we have a number of questions. We will go till 9:30.
Okay.
So there's plenty of
I'll
time,
make sure.
but there are some important questions that need to be asked as well. We did receive a question from the chat, and time permitting, anyone else who has questions to put in the chat, we will put them to our presenters. I did want to just acknowledge and just hats off to Richard Whipple. I've known Richard since he was a fellow at the 2010 census, but the work he has been doing since that time at the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs has been critical, and especially during the transition in leadership at the office. I just want to say thank you. You've been a friend and a colleague. Kelly.
Thank you. So as Rich was saying, what we really want to do is think about, okay, yes, right now there's a lot of thought being put into plan in case of a mass arrival event, but considering there's basically ongoing mass arrival, how can we use this opportunity to bolster what already exists in San Francisco on a longer term basis? So we just talked about accompaniment. I did want to share this beautiful photo of 3 people, families that we've accompanied that all had babies around the same time. So it was a really beautiful experience. This is a Salvadoran, Haitian, and Afghan. These are Salvadoran, Haitian, and Afghan women and their babies a couple months ago. And I just thought this quote really captures what we're trying to do with accompaniment. So I'll let you read it yourselves. So it would be amazing if you are able to encourage your congregation to create an accompaniment team. You don't have to commit to it right away, but just start exploring the idea. And over time and discernment, see if that's right for a small group of people in your congregation. Another way that we are trying to better what's currently out there for migrants is through housing. Housing is so impossible in so many ways, but we do have a few ways that we're working on this. One is that we're partnering with an organization called New Anchor. What New Anchor does is that if there's someone who is interested in offering a space in their own home, either a room or an in-law unit, or maybe even you own an apartment, if you're able to offer that for 3 to 6 months, either for free or reduced cost, that gives a place for people to land when they first get here so that they have a little bit of stability. And everyone who is housed through New Anchor, or I should say hosted through New Anchor, also has support services. So the host is not the person doing all of what we call case management, doing all of the connections to resources. Rather, an accompaniment team is who is doing that. So if you know anyone in your congregation who might be interested in becoming a host, definitely worth exploring. And we can always put them in touch with people who have already done that to share their experiences. Also, we do this basically host people in congregations. There are several congregations I listed here, and there are others as well who have converted a space in their congregation to host someone or a family. Oh, sorry, that slide didn't get finished. But just as an example, one of these Berkeley Friends had a room that they converted. It's now a studio, and they weren't able to build, let's say, a traditional space. And so they were able to get a shower hookup that linked to the sink. And so the sink turns into a shower. So there's creative ways to make these livable spaces. And we have support. We're able to give you guys support, maybe even some funding to convert your space if you're interested in doing this. Another way to be helpful is called sponsorship. This word gets thrown out there a lot. So I'm going to tell you what we mean by sponsorship and what officially the government means by sponsorship. So sponsorship in the government's eyes is a requirement where in order to release someone from detention, or in order for someone to come here through these new programs that you might have heard of for Ukraine, Haiti, Venezuela, and there's one other country as well. People can now get a sponsor while they're outside the United States, and then that permits them to come into the United States. And when the government says sponsor, they're asking you to sign up for several months, financial and other commitment to really like start this person off. So it's basically the same thing as an accompaniment team, but one sponsor is committing to it and there's money involved. So at IM4HI, well, actually backing up. So some of you may start to hear about a new government effort called the Welcome Corps. This is the government's attempt to create accompaniment teams, but we don't really support the government's model. I'll just leave it at that, partially because of the financial responsibility they're putting on congregations and sponsors, whereas we want the government to be accountable to provide these services for people. So when you hear sponsor, it sounds scary and it sounds like a lot of obligation and a lot of responsibility, which it is. But at IM4HI, we are asking people to become what we call paper sponsors. What we mean by this is that, yes, you fill out the paperwork that enables the person to come here. Yes, you are signing off on the official government obligations. However, the agreement between yourself and the person you're sponsoring is that as soon as they get to the US, you no longer have that obligation. So I'll give you an example. We just sponsored a Venezuelan woman who's actually the sister of the guy I pointed out at Twin Peaks. And our sponsor filled out all the paperwork, finished the paperwork. As soon as they got approved as the sponsor, this woman bought her own ticket to the United States and went to people she knows in the United States. She went to North Carolina. The sponsor had no further role. However, what they did provide in signing the paperwork was so instrumental because without that, she wouldn't have been able to come. So the countries I listed here, we actually have people from these countries who have written to us and requested sponsorship. Some of them are family or friends of people that we've accompanied, and some of them are finding us online, and which is mind-boggling because we are not a large organization and we don't advertise what we do, but people are really trying to find resources. So if we can get more sponsors, we can respond to these people and offer to bring them here, even if they go somewhere else in the United States. And then last but not least, I just wanted to put this out there that we want to dream big. Everything we named is super helpful and amazing, but imagine if we could do something like build a welcome center or operate a welcome center for migrants in San Francisco, or a ministry home. These are actual photos. There is conversation about these two options going on right now, and these are photos of buildings being considered for those. It's really preliminary, but I wanted to put it out there because if anyone's interested in those efforts, you can also get involved. So I talked about a lot of things. What's next? As I mentioned, our organization also does advocacy efforts. So there's going to be we do monthly coalition calls, but that it's kind of like how there's a large group here of interfaith congregations. We gather a group of interfaith congregations once a month and talk about advocacy efforts. And the upcoming meeting will be March 8th at 9 a.m. and we'll be talking about how to defend the sanctuary policy in SF because it's currently under threat. We also want to hear back from you right now. If you could put in the chat any ideas you have of what do you need in order to get involved in the things that I just named? Is there something we can ask for from the city for support? Is there something you can ask for from I4HI for support? A few ideas, for example, are, would you want to tour other congregational housing? Would you want a webinar on sponsorship to explain it further? Or do you have interested people in accompaniment, but not enough to create a team and you want to join with another congregation? So those are a few ideas. And I just thank you all for listening. We love San Francisco. We love all of the big thinkers and out of the box thinkers that are willing to get involved in these grassroots efforts that truly transform the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'd ask at this time if you wouldn't mind introducing Nadia, who will be of support to you in fielding some of these questions. And Richard, please feel free to chime in as well. Would you like to introduce Nadia and then we'll get into the questions?
So Nadia, can you wave? So Nadia is our new coordinator for Nueva Esperanza, and they are doing an amazing job with their lived experience as a migrant and also with their lived experience doing accompaniment. So Nadia is going to be here to help answer these questions that may come up and just get to know you all so you all know the face. Welcome, Nadia.
The questions I'm going to ask, this is a faith-based program, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. Okay, there's a lot of politically motivated rhetoric out in the public square, and this could be a really unique opportunity to debunk some of that and also to bring some clarity. To begin with, everybody knows that probably one of the biggest issues in San Francisco is housing and the lack of housing. And so the question would be, why would we support asylum seekers with housing if we have so many other people in San Francisco in need of housing?
Great question. So first of all, everyone deserves housing. Housing is or should be a right. And one way that I think about asylum seekers is just what makes this population unique. There are vulnerabilities in this population that I think help me support giving them housing. For example, asylum seekers often do not speak the language, English here. A lot of them do not. ICE actually takes away their IDs. When they get here, they may come with a passport or an ID. ICE takes it. So they don't have IDs. They don't qualify to get an ID. If you don't have an ID, you don't qualify for certain benefits. I shouldn't call them benefits, but you don't qualify for benefits because of your current immigration status. And you also can't necessarily access resources. So for example, a lot of food banks require an ID. Can't even go to the food bank. So it's really a uniquely vulnerable population.
Rich, I'm gonna put you on the spot for a minute. My sense in the city's response to this is that and you noted some of the departments that you're working with on this. This is not being handled by homelessness and supportive housing. This sector is not being treated in the same way, but it's through HSA and Department of Emergency Management. Can you parse out and explain the nuances why this is being treated differently?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we are trying to partner with the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing as much as we can, of course. We're mindful that some migrant families have already entered our service system through existing shelters. I know that that's not ideal, but many folks have arrived with nowhere to go and no point of contact and end up in our shelter system. So we're actively trying to look at ways that we can create aligned and coordinated processes to support folks and to build the cultural competency of our shelter sites and all of our different kind of agency partners. But I guess to your broader question, I would say that as mentioned earlier, a lot of the planning work right now is really centered on preparing for a shelter activation and kind of preparing for what could be a pretty large scale, I don't know if the term emergency is like the correct term, but we've seen in other cities, so New York, I think, has crossed the threshold of like 40,000 folks that have arrived from the border via bus. I know Denver, in a short period of weeks, went from like, 0 buses to having over 5,000 people. So I think the city is mindful that there is a need to do immediate work now to support the trickle of folks who arrive on their own, through their own processes. But because our Human Services Agency and Department of Emergency Management have special roles when it comes to activating responses to any emergencies that kind of create displacement or needs of this nature, they're the agencies that are leading, at least on this piece of it. And I think, as you pointed out, there's a larger coordination piece that's really critical, that we line up services and pathways for folks who are here, and regardless of how they arrive. But that piece is a lot more complicated. Sometimes it's easier to think about like a shelter activation experience than it is to think about like a whole systems alignment.
We've talked a lot, and again, I want to thank Rabbi Copeland for raising the issue of sanctuary. Sanctuary is not a new concept. This past week, I had lunch with the new vicar at St. John the Evangelist in the Mission, and that's a congregation which was one of the early sanctuary congregations during the political asylee fleeings from El Salvador and Central America. But before that, that church in particular has their doors are painted red. And in the Middle Ages, that was a sign that they were safe once they were inside the doors. A lot of people like to criminalize political asylees. And I'm wondering if you could answer this question. Are we helping people break the law? Are asylum seekers coming here illegally?
Good question. I like that you use the language people tend to use, which is saying things are illegal, which is part of the criminalization. I do want to answer that question, but I realized there is something important I want to say regarding the last question. So Nadia, would you mind sharing specifically what some of the barriers to housing are for asylum seekers?
Yeah, definitely this population, there is a lack to access any opportunity to get housing, especially these people are not familiar with anything about navigating the financial system. When you want to rent a house or apply for a new place, you need to prove that you have credit. These people come here, as Kelly mentioned, they don't have anything, any ID, any social, so that's a big barrier. All these challenges, not only the language barrier, the cultural barrier, but the understanding how the system is quite different than in their home countries.
Yeah, and along those lines, just to give an example, like money doesn't solve the housing problem for this population. It's not necessarily about not having money for rent. We are accompanying a woman who has gotten their work permit, is working for Tesla, has a great job, has been here over 2 years, and is not getting accepted in apartments because they have less than 2 years of credit built. So there's big barriers there. Okay, moving on to your question, Michael. Are we helping people break the law? Are these like, you know, the whole illegal thing? So asylum is an international right. It is an international law that permits you to ask for safety in a new country. And therefore, everyone coming here seeking asylum is actually following the law. Asylum law in brief is that once you step foot into the US, you have 1 year to ask for asylum. And so for that year and for the time it takes for the asylum process to finish, which is through the courts, you're actually considered undocumented. We try to stay away from language that says people are legal or illegal, because that is criminalizing people. And rather they're undocumented because they are not, they don't have their immigration documents, paperwork, until the asylum process is complete. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it also raises the issue of the need for more immigration lawyers to be working with you all, because it seems to me that if there's going to be a deluge, that's going to be one of the greatest needs. And so, you know, I'm making a plug right now for those who are out there perhaps listening or listen to the recording link to contact you all, because I think that this is going to be a great need. Another factor is, you know, since 2008, our organization has been convening the CEOs of the faith-based social service agencies. Among them are groups like Jewish Family and Children's Services that do a lot of work with the resettlement of refugees, and as does International Rescue Committee. If we have these sort of organizations, why would communities of faith get involved if that infrastructure is already there?
Mm-hmm. So there are several large agencies that are contracted by the government to offer refugee resettlement services. Often these services can include a stipend toward housing and 3 months of case management. For example, that's what was offered to Afghans in the last 2 years. Two things. One is that a refugee is distinct from an asylum seeker. Often the terms are used interchangeably, but they're really different because both are seeking safety. However, a refugee is granted their immigration status of being a refugee prior to entering the United States. So as soon as they get here, they have status. Status gives you access to all these resources, all these things, and to the refugee resettlement services. An asylum seeker is literally on their own, undocumented until their process is finished, which can take many years. And the government doesn't provide legal assistance. The government literally provides nothing specifically for asylum seekers. So that's the difference. And of course, getting involved with refugee resettlement is amazing. We are trying to fill a gap that doesn't exist, which is to offer through the faith community the welcome and the resources that nobody else is giving this population.
And I would chime in, if I can chime in quickly there. I would also point out that the organizations that do a lot of the refugee resettlement work actually don't do it in San Francisco because of the cost of living, and do it more in the East Bay or other parts of the Bay Area. So we know that even in those scenarios where there are support systems, like the cost of housing makes for a significant barrier. So imagine if you arrive with no support system and like no network, how like monumental that challenge may feel.
We saw that, we're seeing this now with the Ukrainian refugee resettlement effort, and it really is the East Bay that's taken the lead on that. Mm-hmm. We're heading into an election year. I mean, we're in a time where political polarization could not be, you know, more dramatic. Rich knows this because I called him as soon as I listened to an NPR segment. What what some of these governors like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott are doing is not novel. It's not new. It was done actually during the civil rights movement. They called it the reverse freedom ride, where they would send African Americans to places with promises. To me, my heart broke when I heard what happened at Martha's Vineyard. I'm just wondering, do you have any intel whether this is going to happen here? I mean, what sort of preparations are you making, and what do you foresee? I'm asking you to look into a crystal ball.
Rich, you want to?
Not really, but I will take a stab. I think it is looking into a crystal ball, you know, and I think sadly this is a highly politicized, dehumanizing effort, which is fear mongering of the worst kind. And I think there's really important need for us locally, but then nationally as well, to really like shore up support for migrants and realize that the attacks happening now are on like long-standing agreements and law for asylum seekers. I mean, as Kelly mentioned, the right to seek asylum is an international right and law, and the levels at which we are clamping down, even under the Biden administration, the most recent kind of announcement of border changes and how asylum will be handled are pretty much a replication of what Trump had introduced. So I think even across the aisle, we're seeing really disappointing things around immigration, which is really frustrating, and it feels like the narrative is spiraling. So I think this space and this group has a really important role in helping to like humanize each other, humanize migrants, and to remember some of our shared values, especially here in San Francisco, and the broader value of sanctuary. I guess to the crystal ball element of the question, you know, I do think despite border policy changes and different flows of migrants that we've been seeing, there continues to be new destination cities for busing strategies. So a most recent example is the city of Denver, even after Title 42, which is a policy that's impacting, you know, who is allowed in and paroled. Even after that was kind of continued and applied to particular nationalities, and we saw a slow in the number of migrants being allowed to cross the border, there were still buses arriving in Denver at a moment that we thought was a lower volume. And that scaled up so quickly in terms of, and not all the busing schemes are negative. I would say some are actually being facilitated by, you know, legitimate partners that are organizing respite shelters at the border that are beyond capacity, and they're in desperate need to decompress those shelters. So I think it's very possible that more cities will be destination cities, either through these political stunts or for some of the more legitimate decompression that needs to happen by nonprofits that are at the border that are trying to support and house migrants.
Thank you. You know, this presentation is being given in a snapshot in time. Our congregations for the past 3 years have been trying to navigate through COVID. We've been in a time of isolation. This is quite a time to be making an appeal to congregations to get involved and engage. Can you address, you know, that challenge in particular? Because I think we need a little bit of hope right now, and we're in the process of reconnecting. But if you could take this on, it would be greatly appreciative.
So a few things. One is we did continue to have accompaniment throughout COVID. Sometimes it was strictly virtual. There are literally people we've had relationships with for a year that we've never met in person, even though they live around the corner, because each person on a team chooses to what degree they can get involved in general, but in respect to COVID as well, COVID precautions as well. So I do want to encourage people, if they are cautious regarding COVID, that is welcome. And there is a lot you can do, even if you don't see people in person. There's a lot of times research that will be helpful that people can do. For example, let's give the example of Raquel and the food bank. You from your home can research where's the nearest food bank and what are the requirements, and report that back to the team. Also, we know that people are very burnt out, and they are burnt out on volunteering. And this is why we create teams, because we don't want, you really do share the load. And we can put limits on what the expectations are of the team. We're not responsible for anyone that we are accompanying. We're walking by their side. So I hope that that would help people feel like they can get involved, even if it's just to create the relationship.
We've had a couple of really insightful questions in the chat. I want to honor your time, but if I could indulge you for a couple more questions, is that okay? From Nancy Wecker, please talk about the current attempt right now in San Francisco that is being made to undermine sanctuary. One is to make an exception of terms of sanctuary with a deal with ICE. Another is to scapegoat immigrants for fentanyl problem. Many groups of faith are working against these attempts, including Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. These attacks are being discussed at the San Francisco Board of Supervisors at the next meeting. We need to hear more voices to this protest. I'm going to give you an opportunity to chime in and say your piece right now, because I know that it's the elephant in the room.
I'm going to briefly respond. Yes, that is happening. Yes, it's very important. And as you said, Michael, so much history has gone and effort has gone into making San Francisco a sanctuary city. It is under threat, and I would just encourage you, Nancy, to come to the meeting, and we'll put it in the chat when it is, but we're going to be talking in depth about that at the upcoming coalition call.
From Carol, are you seeing unaccompanied minors arriving in San Francisco? And so what do you do to assist them specifically?
Sorry, I just lost my visuals, so I'm distracted. But yes, there are unaccompanied minors arriving. That is also a constant. Our organization doesn't work with unaccompanied minors. We specifically work with people who are considered adults, and preferably like over 21, just because whether you're unaccompanied or not, as a young adult or minor, you have really different needs than someone who is, let's just say, an adult. So for example, our program's based on the idea of self-sufficiency, and a minor is not self-sufficient. They're not going to be self-sufficient. They are a minor. So I don't know if Richard, if you have anything else to add about unaccompanied minors.
Yeah, I know that there continues to be a large number of unaccompanied minors that are arriving, and there are different kind of set of service providers in the city that I know provide a lot of support, both legal and social services to them. I think groups like Legal Services for Children and KIND are taking the lead on a lot of those cases. And I know that we have folks on the line here with the school district who also shared data that we do continue to see unaccompanied folks arriving too, and unaccompanied minors in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think you answered this, but I'm not sure, Richard. This was specifically put to you. Are legal services you talked about available to immigrants who have already arrived?
This is a great question. Immigration legal services are incredibly stretched. We're very fortunate in San Francisco to have a robust network of community legal service providers. But for example, the wait list to get representation on an asylum case or in the immigration court is almost at 300 people, if not more at this point. So it's depending on people's timeline for when they need to appear and what type of immigration support they need, they could be placed on a really long wait list or potentially not get support just because of the demand, which is really, really high.
Yeah, I'd like to add that there are actually quite a few legal services organizations and agencies. So yes, there are long wait lists, but thank God we have those. So there are possibilities of getting legal representation.
And as the scripture says, ask and you shall receive. We already have a referral to an attorney here that I will share with you after the program. Do sponsors have to be individuals, or could a sponsor be a congregation?
Sponsors, according to the paperwork, a congregation can be a sponsor. Sorry, I have something in my throat. But I personally tried to fill out the paperwork on behalf of IM4HI. It can be any group. So I tried to fill it out on behalf of IM4HI. I thought it felt less reliable than a individual being a sponsor, because the paperwork is geared toward an individual. So there's like a one-liner that says, if you're a group, fill it out this other way, but it's not as clear. So I know that you can, I just trust that process a little bit less than if it's a individual.
One comment, it's not a question, but notes that immigrants under 26 and over 50 are eligible for Medi-Cal. Others residing in San Francisco are eligible for Health ESF. Moving along, thank you, Kelly and Nadia, for being the inventive, fierce, and heart-forward leaders for IM4HI, program that accompanies NEET teams and with the wise counsel that we need. So that's a word of hope. Oh, there's okay, hold on. Our congregation in Tiburon has helped a Kosovar family come in 1999. It was International Rescue Committee that connected us with the family of 10. It was difficult to find housing, but we managed. It was a great experience for the congregation, but had problems as well. I'm a retired Presbyterian minister, so there's a testimony. I want to be respectful of these wonderful comments that have come in. How wide are casting the asylum? How wide are we casting the asylum seeker net? I'm aware of young people fleeing Russia because they would be pressed into military service against the Ukraine. What support is available for these seekers?
So they're absolutely, our net doesn't even exist. Like, we welcome everyone who, whether you're seeking asylum or not, we focus on asylum seekers, but we actually accompany anyone who's recently arrived. They could be pursuing a U visa, a T visa, or there could be no actual pathway to legal status available for them. For example, climate refugees, people fleeing because the climate has destroyed their land or property. There is no current legal pathway for them. So I'm just saying that to say the idea of a net, like, we don't close off anyone based on what country they're coming from or why they're deciding to be here. So yes, we have accompanied people from Russia, and that is absolutely welcome.
And I would just share from a recent visit to a San Diego immigration facility that was operated by Catholic Charities of San Diego. All of the language in their respite shelter was in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Russian. And when visiting Customs and Border Patrol and the actual port of entry, they flagged that Russian asylum seekers were a huge surge in the last few months, and particularly since the war. So there's definitely that's already happening as well, and they're included in this broader conversation we're having about asylum seekers.
We're going to have a hard stop at 9:45, but there are a couple more questions. So as succinctly as you can respond, how can the IM4HI or the city support a congregation to get involved?
Well, that's a question for all of you. How we want to hear from you if this is even a hope for your congregation and interest. What is preventing you from moving forward, and how might we support you towards exploring these options?
Okay. The next person says, knowing the great need for housing, it is frustrating to have space, say a bedroom, that is sometimes unused, but be unable to make that space available to relieve the housing situation. The accompaniment model is a way to take advantage of this otherwise wasted resource of space that is temporarily unused, because it provides accountability to the people who need the space to the family who has the space, but no additional resources to offer. Thanks for the presentation, Kelly, Richard, and Nadia. Just no question, but a vote of confidence. We only have two more. One more, actually. To everyone, San Francisco sanctuary policy is currently under threat. Please join us next Wednesday, March 8th, 9 to 10:30 to learn more at IM4HI, Monthly Coalition on Immigration, Advocacy, and Accompaniment. So there you have it. I will be sending the chat to the presenters. I want to say a very special thank you to all of you for your contribution today. And we will be sending this recording link along with the PowerPoint and links to resources. So please look forward to that and share it with your communities of faith and allied organizations. We encourage you to join us next week. We're going to have a very interesting conversation. We're going to be welcoming former San Francisco City Attorney and former President of the Board of Supervisors, Luis Rennie, to talk about the history, mission, vision, and current challenges of Laguna Honda. It promises to be an important and timely and critical presentation, so we would be honored if you would join us. This brings to a close today's presentation. Again, thank you to our presenters, and thank you to Cynthia Zambucas, the Program and Administrative Associate at the Interfaith Council, and Trey Russell Allen, our tech consultant, for their important work to make these possible, and to the Meta Fund. God bless you and God keep you.
Thank you, everyone.